Hello and welcome to another one. Apologies for the very blatant throat clear right at the beginning of the video, but it's probably better that than me being at my gravelly best. Um, so yes, again, I'm not here to ramble for 3 minutes at the start of the video. I'm getting gradually better at that, hopefully. Um, I want to talk about being a better friend to yourself, which seems like a bit of an odd title. It's not the most clickbaity one I've ever done, I must admit. But yeah, I was thinking about this recently. So uh, it's an interesting job being a parent. On top of all the other kind of interactions with different people that you have through work and life in general. Um, but we have a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old at the moment. So when it comes to anything up to the age of about 7, we've kind of seen a lot of the normal hurdles that you come across up to that age, but anything beyond that is new territory. And I guess every kid is not the same either. So just because we've been through something with our 7-year-old over the years doesn't mean that our 4-year-old is going to be exactly the same, and I'm sure our 1-year-old won't either. So you're always coming across new challenges. Um, but this concept of being a better friend is something that I've been using recently on the 7-year-old, because what we've noticed, like not kind of going into any kind of medical history here, because I'm sure you probably wouldn't want me to be sharing too much on here, and I don't really want to share too much on here. Um, but when we are trying to think of the right language to use here that's not going to sound wrong. I was going to say correct behavior. That's not what I mean. But when there's something, you need to advise your child that whatever they're doing, they need to not do, and they need to do something else for a little while. His natural tendency then has been to, so initially there'll be resistance to him, and then he'll be upset at being told off, which isn't we try not to approach it as a telling off. We try and approach things as calmly as humanly possible at all times. Occasionally if it's safety critical, it's not that calm. Occasionally if we're a bit tired and grumpy, which happens sometimes, then it's not calm, and we just kind of have to reflect on that afterwards. But yeah, most of the time we approach it quite calmly. And what we've noticed he does now, and he has been doing recently, is almost going into this kind of cycle of, again, the language is probably not right here, but like cycle of self-loathing a little bit. So there's almost like this little gap in self-esteem that appears, where he kind of then just beats himself up about it for a while afterwards. And it kind of came out of nowhere a little while back, and we were a little bit alarmed. We were a little bit alarmed when it first happened. Um, but we kind of we kept calm, and we kind of let him calm down, and we spoke to him about it. And there's a lot of stuff around, I think it's fueled by things from school. I'm stupid, and why do I do this, and why do I do that, and I'm dumb. Quite kind of alarming stuff when we chatted about it. And it's been happening recurrently since then. And I was listening to, I can't remember if it was an audiobook or whether it was a YouTube video or a podcast, and there was a Stoic story, a historical story of one of the Stoic philosophers had come across this guy, ranting and raving, talking to himself, and he wasn't being very nice to himself. Is probably the most PC way to put it, because he had made some mistake or done something that he didn't want to do. And this guy, the Stoic philosopher, just stopped and spoke to him and said, "You need to be a better friend to yourself." And I was really struck, as I sometimes am, by these concepts and go, so simple but so effective. And these are the kinds of things that have helped me to manage my mindset over the past um, few years, since I've been heavily into my own personal development, in addition to helping people with theirs. And it is just such a simple concept. And so I remember speaking to my wife about it, and her thinking, wow, such a simplistic way to look at it, but potentially so effective. Um, And so I'd kind of started using it on myself first, although I'm much better from that point of view in terms of the, the self-loathing. Oh, why did I do that? I'm so stupid. I try not to talk to myself like that. I haven't done for, for a while. It still happens. At the times where I feel a bit more kind of physically or mentally vulnerable, so if things have been, and I've had those moments recently, things have been a bit tough at work in terms of, getting up to speed with the job. I've put myself into a really vulnerable position with that, as I've discussed. So that's kind of natural that that will happen. So I'm, managing that, but just trying to use that kind of approach of, if I do feel like I'm targeting myself, that, I can just use a simplistic thing, like, right, I need to be a better friend to myself. So it's a work in progress with the 7-year-old. That it's going to take time. That I say we don't, we certainly don't berate our children. So I definitely don't think it certainly doesn't come from that. I don't know if there's some kind of natural negative tendency there to, I don't know if that's just something that's hardwired into us. I'm not 100% sure, because we certainly don't, we don't berate our children, we don't call them names. So I don't think that this has come from us. But obviously we have to. It might not be our fault that that's what's happening, but we certainly need to take responsibility for it. So that's, so that's what we're doing. So I did introduce the concept to him. There was one day he went off like that. I had to tell him off for doing something, or try and kind of recalibrate his behaviour on some topic. And he got upset. He got angry. He started berating himself, about how stupid he was. And I kind of said to him, "You need to stop doing that." I said, "I will come and talk to you once you've calmed down." Gave him some time to calm down, and went and sat with him, and we chatted through what had happened. And I shared my observation with him about how he was talking to himself. And I said to him that I think you need to be a better friend to yourself. And he kind of looked at me, and he said, bearing in mind he's 7, he looked at me and he said, "I feel like I'm more of an enemy to myself sometimes." And I was like, what a great observation, and what a great way to put it. That's so accurate, and I definitely recognise that in myself. Fortunately, rarely now, but certainly in the past, a lot. That kind of self-loathing that you can get. Why do I do things like that? You want yourself to be someone different, and you don't like the person that you're being at the moment, because that person you want to be doesn't do things like that. And that's what he said. He said, "I feel like sometimes I'm more of an enemy to myself." And and I was like, "Look, there'll be times where you feel like that. It's not going to change overnight. But I want you to try and remember that, at these times where you're starting to think like that, you're starting to think, I'm stupid, I'm whatever. We need to then take a stop, and we need to think, no, I'm not talking to myself." And I explained why. I said, because, over time, if you don't, over time of doing that, it will become a habit. You will do it automatically. And the more you think like that, the worse you will feel, guaranteed. Essentially how you are is a product of that kind of pool, that cocktail of thoughts and feelings and emotions, that's essentially going to dictate how you behave. So I said that, as you get older, I said we just really need to work on this. At these times where you're thinking those things, you're starting to say those things, to stop and to go, I need to be a better friend to myself. And I even used the example of, would you ever talk to your best friends at school the way you're talking to yourself? And he said, "No, absolutely not, absolutely not." I said, "Well, that's the benchmark that we need to use. If you would not talk to someone um, who you like, who you love that way, then you certainly should not be talking to yourself like that." So yeah, be a better friend to yourself, I think, is a useful mantra to pull out the bag, um, for when you're beating yourself up. And I know I've been bad for that in the past, and I still do it sometimes. I will be honest. Let me know what you think of that one. Share it with people. Why not? Go wild. And I will catch you in the next one.